Story start now. My 12 years living with ghosts. The house that wouldn't let us leave when my husband and I signed the papers for our first house together. We thought we'd hit the jackpot. The place was old, sure, but it had character. High ceilings, original hardwood floors, and enough space for the family we hoped to have someday. The price was right too. Maybe a little too right for a house that size in our area. But we didn't ask too many questions. We were just excited to own something that was ours. The previous owner was a young woman, maybe in her early 20s. She had long dark hair and seemed nervous the whole time we were doing the walkthrough. I remember thinking she was just sad to leave her childhood home. When we were signing the final papers, she pulled me aside in the kitchen. Her hands were shaking a little. "I need to tell you something about this house," she said quietly, looking over her shoulder like someone might be listening. "It's haunted. There are spirits here, but they're not bad. They won't hurt you. Just be nice to them, okay? Talk to them sometimes. Let them know you're not trying to push them out." I smiled politely and nodded, the way you do when someone tells you something crazy but you don't want to be rude. Inside, I was rolling my eyes. Every single person who lives in an old house says it's haunted. It's like a requirement or something. I figured she'd heard some creaking floors at night, maybe some scratching in the walls, probably raccoons. Old houses always have raccoons, or squirrels, or mice. Something alive and explainable. My husband didn't even want me to tell him what she'd said. "Please don't start with the ghost stuff," he laughed when I mentioned it later. "It's just an old house. Old houses make noise. That's all it is. We moved our stuff in that weekend. Well, I say we moved in, but really we were still fixing the place up. The wiring was ancient and possibly dangerous. The plumbing needed work. Half the windows didn't open properly. We had a lot to do before we could actually live there comfortably, so I took 2 weeks off work to focus on getting the essential repairs done. That first day, I was completely alone in the house. My husband was still at his job, and I'd told him I'd handle the easy stuff, like mapping out which circuits controlled which rooms. The power was off at the main breaker because I was being careful, and it was the middle of July. No power meant no air conditioning, no fans, nothing but the oppressive heat that old houses seem to trap inside their walls like ovens. I was upstairs in what we'd decided would be our bedroom, tracing wires behind the walls with a voltage tester. The house was silent except for the occasional groan of the old wood settling. Then I heard it. Laughter. Not adult laughter, children's laughter. High-pitched and delighted, like kids playing tag or hide-and-seek. It was coming from down the hallway, from one of the smaller bedrooms at the back of the house. I straightened up, listening carefully. The laughter got louder, and now I could hear footsteps. Small footsteps running. Back and forth across the floor above me. Wait, no. I was already upstairs. These footsteps were on the same floor as me, just in a different room. "Hello?" I called out, feeling slightly stupid. There was obviously nobody in the house but me. I'd locked the door when I came in. "Is someone there?" The laughter stopped instantly. The footsteps stopped too. The silence that followed was so complete it almost hurt my ears. I walked down the hallway, my work boots echoing on the bare wooden floors. I checked the first bedroom. Empty. Just bare walls and dusty windows. I checked the second bedroom. Also empty. The bathroom. Nothing. The third bedroom at the end of the hall. Completely vacant. I stood there in the empty room where I definitely, absolutely 100% heard children running around and laughing just moments before. The hair on my arms was standing up, but I told myself it was just the heat making me hear things. Dehydration, maybe. I'd been working for 3 hours straight without water. I went back downstairs to grab a bottle of water from the cooler I'd brought. It was even hotter down there, stuffy and thick. I decided to step outside for a minute, get some fresh air, cool down a little. The moment I stepped onto the front porch, I heard it. Click. The unmistakable sound of a door lock turning. I spun around and grabbed the doorknob. Locked. The front door, which I'd left wide open because of the heat, was now closed and locked. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, checking my pockets. My keys were inside, sitting on the kitchen counter exactly where I'd left them. My phone, too. I walked around the house, checking every window on the ground floor. All locked. We hadn't unlocked them yet. I tried the back door. Also locked. I'd locked it myself that morning and hadn't opened it since. Now, here's the thing about this door. It was old, probably original to the house. It didn't hang quite right in the frame. Over the years, the house had settled, and the door frame had shifted just enough that the door naturally wanted to swing open. You had to really push it closed and turn the knob to get it to latch properly. There was no way, absolutely no way, that door had closed itself and locked. The physics didn't work. But it had. I ended up having to break a small basement window to get back inside. The whole time I was jimmying the window open and squeezing through, scraping my arms and getting covered in dirt and spider webs, I heard it. Giggling. Children giggling. It sounded like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Real funny, I shouted to the empty house as I climbed through. Very mature. The giggling got louder. I told myself I was being ridiculous. There was a logical explanation. Maybe the door had a draft issue I hadn't noticed. Maybe there was some weird air pressure thing happening because of the heat. Maybe the lock was faulty and had engaged on its own. The next day, it happened again. I was working on the electrical panel in the basement when I heard the front door slam shut. I ran upstairs. Locked. Keys inside. Another window entry. More giggling. Day 3. Same thing. Door closed and locked while I was working upstairs. This time I heard the running footsteps again right before it happened, like someone was racing down the stairs to beat me to the door. By day 4, I was getting frustrated. I went to the hardware store and bought a new lock set for the front door. Something modern, something that couldn't possibly lock on its own. I spent an hour installing it properly, making sure everything was aligned and working smoothly. That afternoon, I went upstairs to work on the bedroom wiring again. I made sure to wedge the door open with a doorstop, a big rubber doorstop that would take some serious force to move. 30 minutes later, I heard a sound, the doorstop being kicked out of the way. Then the door closing, then the lock clicking. "Are you serious right now?" I yelled, stomping down the stairs. Locked. The brand new lock that I'd personally installed just hours before. Locked tight. But this time was different. This time, when I walked around to find another way in, all the other doors in the house were also locked. The back door. The side door that led to the mudroom. Even the basement door that I'd left wide open. All locked. I could hear laughing coming from inside. Multiple voices. At least 2 or 3 kids, maybe more. They were laughing so hard it sounded like they could barely breathe. Okay, I shouted at the house. "You win. Very funny. Can I please come back inside now? I have work to do." Nothing changed. I ended up having to call my husband to bring his keys home during his lunch break. When I explained what happened, he thought I was messing with him. "Babe, doors don't lock themselves," he said patiently, like he was talking to a child. "You probably just forgot you locked it." "I didn't lock anything." "And how do you explain all the other doors being locked too?" He didn't have an answer for that, but I could tell he thought I was either pranking him or losing my mind. When he got home and let me in, the first thing I did was remove the locks from all the doors. Not just unscrew them, but completely remove them and put them in a box in the garage. If there were no locks, nothing could lock me out. That worked. Sort of. The doors stopped locking, but they didn't stop closing. I'd be working upstairs and every single door on that floor would slowly swing shut one after another like dominoes. I'd open them all again. 10 minutes later, closed again. It became a game, me versus the house. I'd open the doors, they'd close them, back and forth all day long. The weirdest part was that I could always tell when it was about to happen. The temperature would drop just slightly, maybe 5 or 10 degrees. Not enough to be comfortable in the July heat, but enough to notice. And I'd hear them, the children. Sometimes whispering too quiet for me to make out words, sometimes humming, sometimes just breathing, like they were standing right behind me. One afternoon, I was up on a ladder, installing a new light fixture in the master bedroom. I heard footsteps enter the room behind me. Small footsteps, like a child around 6 or 7 years old. They walked right up to the base of my ladder and stopped. I looked down, nothing there, but I could feel someone looking up at me. The presence was so strong it made my hands shake. "Hi," I said, feeling absolutely insane for talking to empty air. "I'm just fixing the light. I'll be done in a minute." The presence stayed there, watching me work. It didn't feel threatening exactly, just curious, like a kid watching an adult do something interesting. "You like old houses?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady as I twisted wire connectors together. "I like them too. This is a good house. Strong bones, you know. Just need some love." I felt something touch my ankle. Light, like a child's hand. I jerked so hard I nearly fell off the ladder. Okay, no touching," I said firmly. "That's a rule. No touching people on ladders." "That's dangerous." The hand disappeared. A moment later I heard a small voice, barely more than a whisper. "Sorry." My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out, but I made myself stay calm. "It's okay," I managed. "Just be more careful." I finished the light fixture and got down from the ladder as quickly as I could. My legs were shaking. When I reached the ground, I looked around the empty room. "Thank you for being patient while I worked," I said to the air, giggling. Multiple children this time, like I'd said something hilarious. That night, I told my husband everything, every detail. The locked doors, the footsteps, the voices, the touching. He listened with this expression on his face that was half concern and half amusement. "Maybe you should take a break from working alone in the house," he suggested gently. "The heat is getting to you. You're probably dehydrated." "I'm not dehydrated. I'm not hearing things. There are children in that house." "Dead children?" When he said it like that, it sounded insane. I knew it sounded insane, but I also knew what I'd experienced. "I don't know what they are," I admitted, "but they're there. The girl who sold us the house tried to warn us. She said it was haunted." "Babe, everyone says their old house is haunted. Maybe everyone is right." We moved into the house 2 weeks later, ready or not. The essential work was done. We had electricity, running water, working toilets. Everything else could wait. We set up our bedroom first, then slowly started unpacking the rest of our stuff. That's when things really started to get strange. The upstairs bathroom had a toilet that would flush by itself. I'd hear it in the middle of the night. Flush. Wait 30 seconds, flush again. Sometimes it would flush 4 or 5 times in a row. At first, I thought it was just a mechanical problem. Old toilets do that sometimes when the flapper valve is worn out. So I took the whole thing apart, replaced all the internals with brand new parts. Modern everything. It should have been impossible for that toilet to flush without someone physically pushing the handle down. It flushed anyway. I started testing it. Before we left for work in the morning, I'd put a tiny piece of lint in the bowl, just a speck barely visible. When we came home 8 hours later, it would be gone. The water would be crystal clear. My husband worked different hours than me, so I knew it wasn't him doing it. We worked at the same time 3 days a week, meaning the house was completely empty. Still, every single day that toilet would flush while we were gone. It was annoying but harmless, so I ignored it. Until we got the water bill. $600 for 1 month. Our neighbors had water bills around $80. Ours was $600. "That toilet is flushing constantly," I told my husband. "All day, every day. It's wasting hundreds of gallons." So I did the only thing I could think of. I shut off the water to that bathroom completely. Turned the valve until water stopped flowing to that toilet. Problem solved, right? Wrong. The next night, I was woken up at 2 a.m. by a sound, running water. I got up and followed the noise. It was coming from the upstairs bathroom. The one I'd shut off. The toilet was overflowing, not flushing, overflowing. Water was pouring onto the floor, soaking through the old wood, dripping down into the kitchen below. I ran to the shut-off valve. It was turned on, fully open. I turned it off again, tighter this time, then mopped up the water and tried to go back to sleep. At 4 a.m., the same thing happened. The toilet was overflowing again. The valve was open again. This went on for 3 nights. Every time I shut off the water, something would turn it back on. I even tried putting a padlock on the shut-off valve. The next morning, the padlock was sitting on the bathroom counter and the valve was open. Finally, I gave up. I left the water on. The toilet could flush itself all it wanted. We'd just pay the extra water bill. The flushing stopped immediately, like whatever was doing it had just wanted to prove a point. My husband was not handling any of this well. He's a logical person, a scientist by training. He needs explanations that make sense. Ghosts don't make sense. Dead children playing pranks with plumbing don't make sense. It got worse for him when the phone started ringing. There was a room on the first floor that we were using for storage. It had been some kind of sitting room originally, with built-in bookshelves and a big window that looked out onto the backyard. We'd piled it full of boxes we hadn't unpacked yet. One evening, we were sitting in the living room watching TV when we heard it. An old-fashioned phone ringing. Not a cell phone ringtone. An actual mechanical bell ringing, loud and insistent. "Did you bring an old phone from your mom's house?" my husband asked. "No. All our phones are cell phones." The ringing continued. We followed the sound to the storage room. It was definitely coming from in there, but we didn't have a landline. We'd never even set one up. My husband started moving boxes, searching for the source of the sound. The ringing stopped just as suddenly as it had started. "Maybe it was from outside," he said. "Someone's phone in their yard." But we both knew that wasn't true. The sound had definitely been inside our house. It happened again the next night, and the night after that. Always around the same time, always from that same room. My husband became obsessed with finding the source. He'd tear through the boxes, checking every single item, convinced there had to be an old phone in there somewhere that we'd forgotten about. He never found one because there wasn't one. The ringing kept happening anyway. Then there was the painting. When we'd bought the house, the previous owner had left a few things behind. Some furniture that was too heavy to move. Some old curtains and one painting. It was a portrait of a woman, maybe in her 30s, wearing clothes from the 1920s or 30s, dark hair, serious expression, hands folded in her lap. It wasn't particularly beautiful or valuable looking, just old. The painting was hanging in the storage room, above the built-in bookshelves. My husband hated it. "It's creepy," he said. "She's always watching you. Can we get rid of it? It's just a painting. I don't like it. Those eyes follow you around the room." I thought he was being dramatic, but if it bothered him that much, fine, we could get rid of it. He took it down one Saturday morning and carried it out to the garage, intending to drop it off at a donation center later. The moment he set it down, we heard crying. Not real crying. It sounded like it was coming through a wall, muffled and distant, but definitely there. A woman crying, deep, heartbroken sobs. The sound was coming from the storage room. We both stood there listening to it, frozen in place. It went on for maybe 2 minutes, these terrible grief-stricken sobs that made my chest feel tight. "Bring it back," I told him. "What? The painting? Bring it back inside. Put it back. That's insane. A painting can—" "Just do it!" He grabbed the painting and carried it back inside, back to the storage room, back to its spot on the wall above the bookshelves. The crying stopped. We stood there in silence, staring at the painting. The woman in the portrait stared back, her expression exactly the same as always, serious, maybe a little sad, but definitely not crying. "Okay," my husband said quietly. "The painting stays." After that, he started to believe. Not all the way, not completely, but enough that he stopped trying to find logical explanations for everything that happened. He just accepted that our house was weird and tried not to think about it too much. But accepting it didn't mean he was comfortable with it. He was scared, actually scared. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and find him lying there with his eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house. "Did you hear that?" he'd whisper. It's just the house settling. No, that was footsteps upstairs in the hallway. And he was right. I could hear them too. Small feet walking back and forth above our bedroom, even though there was nobody up there. Sometimes we'd hear voices, whispering. Once, I clearly heard a child say, "Shh, they're trying to sleep." My husband started sleeping with the lights on. All of them. The bedroom light, the hallway light, even the bathroom light. He needed to be able to see that there was nothing there. But I think that made it worse, because sometimes with all those lights on, you'd see things out of the corner of your eye. Shadows moving when nothing was casting them. A blur of motion in a doorway when you looked up quickly. I wasn't scared, which I know sounds strange. Maybe I should have been. But I'd grown up in an old house too, and weird things had happened there as well. I'd gotten used to the idea that some places just have more going on than others. Whatever was in our house didn't feel malicious. Mischievous, yes. Playful, definitely. But not evil. The smell of lilac started showing up in random rooms. Strong, sweet, overpowering. Like someone had brought in huge bouquets of fresh lilacs. But it was winter. Lilacs don't bloom in winter. And we didn't have any lilac-scented candles or air fresheners. The smell would just appear suddenly, fill a room completely, then disappear just as quickly. Sometimes in the kitchen, sometimes in the bedroom. Once, it was so strong in the bathroom that it made my eyes water. My husband refused to acknowledge the lilac smell. He'd smell it, I knew he did because I could see him react to it, but he wouldn't talk about it. I think admitting that he could smell phantom flowers was a bridge too far for him. Then there were the balls of smoke, except they weren't smoke exactly. They were more like dense air, dark spots in the atmosphere that would float through rooms. They didn't have a distinct shape or color. They were just areas where the air looked thicker, hazier. They'd drift by slowly, maybe 2 or 3 feet off the ground, then fade away. The first time I saw one, I thought there was a fire somewhere. I ran around the house checking every room, sniffing for smoke. Nothing. The second time, I just watched it float past me in the hallway, moving against the air current from the vent. "Did you see that?" I asked my husband. "See what?" "That smoky thing. It just floated past." I didn't see anything, but I knew he had. I'd seen him track it with his eyes. We started having dreams, vivid, detailed dreams about people we'd never met. I dreamed about a woman in a long dress standing in our kitchen, cooking something on an old wood stove that hadn't existed in decades. She turned and looked at me, smiled, and said, "The bread is almost ready." I woke up with the smell of baking bread so strong I thought my husband had actually made breakfast. He hadn't. He dreamed about a man working in the basement, building something out of wood. The man had a thick mustache and wore suspenders. In the dream, my husband asked him what he was making, and the man said, "Shelves for Mary's preserves. She's putting up tomatoes this year." We started writing down the details from our dreams. The woman's dress had tiny blue flowers on it. The man had a scar on his left hand. There was a girl, maybe 8 years old, with braided hair who sat on the back steps and played with a rag doll. On a whim, I went to the local historical society and asked if they had any records about our house. The librarian there was thrilled. She loved it when people wanted to research their old homes. She came back with a folder full of photocopied documents, property records, census data, old photographs. And there they were, the people from our dreams. Mary Thornton lived in the house from 1923 to 1928. In the photograph, she was wearing a dress with tiny blue flowers, exactly like the one in my dream. Robert Thornton, her husband, thick mustache, suspenders. There was even a notation in the records about an accident with a saw that had injured his left hand. Catherine Thornton, their daughter, 8 years old, long braided hair. The photograph showed her sitting on the back steps of our house holding a rag doll. "How did we dream about these people?" my husband asked, staring at the photographs. "How did we know these specific details?" I didn't have an answer, still don't. But the most incredible thing happened one night about 3 years after we'd moved in. The night that made me absolutely certain our ghosts were not only real but watching out for us. I'd been working late, didn't get home until almost midnight. I was exhausted and starving. My husband was already asleep upstairs. I decided to make some French fries. Just throw some frozen fries in a pan with some oil, quick and easy. I put the pan on the stove, turned on the heat, and went to take a quick shower while the oil heated up. I know. You should never leave cooking food unattended. It's dangerous and stupid, and I knew better. But I was so tired, and I thought I'd be quick. I wasn't quick. The hot water felt amazing, and I ended up staying in the shower longer than I'd planned, maybe 15 minutes. When I turned off the water, I heard a crash from downstairs, a loud breaking sound like dishes shattering. I jumped out of the shower, wrapped a towel around myself, and ran downstairs. The entire dish drainer from the kitchen counter was lying in the middle of the floor. It had been sitting flat on the counter, loaded with clean dishes I'd washed that morning. Heavy dishes, plates, bowls, glasses. The drainer itself was one of those metal ones with a weighted base. It shouldn't have been able to fall off the counter by itself. It definitely shouldn't have been able to launch itself 6 feet across the room. But there it was, lying on its side in the middle of the kitchen floor, dishes everywhere, most of them broken, making a terrible noise that had brought me running. And then I saw it. The frying pan on the stove. The oil in it was on fire. Flames shooting up a foot high, black smoke billowing toward the ceiling. I grabbed the lid from another pot and slammed it down on top of the frying pan, smothering the flames. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. If I'd stayed in the shower for another minute, maybe 2, that fire would have spread. The cabinets above the stove would have caught, the curtains. The whole kitchen could have gone up, the whole house could have burned down, with my husband asleep upstairs. But something had thrown those dishes across the room. Something had made a noise loud enough and startling enough to get me out of the shower immediately. Something had made sure I saw that fire before it was too late. I stood there in the smoky kitchen in my towel, surrounded by broken dishes, and started crying. "Thank you," I said to the empty room. "Thank you so much." I felt a hand touch my shoulder, light, gentle, a child's hand. "You're welcome," a small voice whispered. After that, I wasn't just okay with sharing my house with ghosts. I was grateful. My husband had a harder time accepting it. Even after I explained what had happened, showed him the scorch marks on the ceiling above the stove, the broken dishes, he struggled with it. "So you're telling me that dead children threw dishes on the floor to save us from a fire?" "Yes. That's insane, I know. But it happened. Yes." He sat with that for a while. Then he got up, walked to the middle of the living room, and spoke to the air. "Thank you," he said stiffly, "for saving us. I appreciate it." Giggling. Multiple children giggling, delighted. From that point on, he was better. Not completely comfortable, but better. He stopped sleeping with all the lights on. He stopped jumping every time he heard footsteps. He even started talking to them sometimes, in his own awkward way. "Good morning," he'd say when he came downstairs. "I hope you all slept well. Or we're going out for a while. Please don't burn the house down. Or could you maybe not flush that toilet quite so much? The water bill is killing us." It became our normal. We'd hear children running and laughing upstairs, and we'd just smile and keep watching TV. We'd smell lilacs in the middle of winter, and we'd breathe it in and think about how nice it was. We'd see smoky shapes drifting through rooms, and we'd just nod in acknowledgement. Our friends thought we were crazy when we told them about the house. Some of them didn't believe us at all. Others believed us but thought we should move, get out while we could. But why would we leave? This was our home, and we weren't living here alone. We were sharing it with others who'd lived here before us, who'd loved this house before we did. They weren't hurting us. They were protecting us. We've been here 12 years now. The activity has quieted down a lot over the past year or so. The toilets don't flush as much. The doors don't close themselves as often. We rarely hear the children running and playing anymore. My husband jokes that we've bored them to death. Actually dead. Double dead. I think maybe they've just gotten comfortable with us. We're not new and interesting anymore. We're just the current occupants, living our normal lives. We're not a threat to them or the house they loved. We're taking care of it, fixing it up, making it beautiful again. Maybe that's all they wanted, to know that their home was in good hands. Or maybe they've moved on to wherever spirits go when they're ready to leave. I kind of hope not, though. I'd miss them if they were completely gone. The house would feel empty without the occasional giggle echoing down the hallway or the smell of lilacs appearing in the bathroom. We've started talking about whether we want to have kids of our own. Real, living, breathing kids. My husband worries about it. What if the ghosts don't like having real children here? He asks. They are real children, I remind him. Or they were. I think they'd love having kids to play with. What if they scare them? Kids aren't scared of the same things adults are. Our kids will probably just think it's cool that they have built-in playmates. We haven't decided yet. But if we do have children, I'll make sure to teach them the same thing the previous owner taught us. Be nice to the spirits. They don't mean any harm, they're just sharing the space with us. This is their home too. And if our kids ever come running to us saying there are ghost children in the house who want to play, I'll believe them. I'll thank the spirits for being kind to our children. I'll make sure everyone gets along, because that's what you do when you live in a haunted house. You share, you respect, you coexist, and you definitely don't leave cooking food unattended on the stove. The ghosts can only save you so many times. Next one story start now. The house we built from scratch that built its own mysteries. Back in 1971, my husband and I did something that most young couples could only dream about. We bought a plot of land on the edge of town and decided to build our own house from the ground up. Not just buy a house that was already standing, but actually watch it being constructed brick by brick, beam by beam, exactly the way we wanted it. I remember standing on that empty lot on a crisp spring morning, holding the blueprints in my hands while the wind tried to rip them away. The land was completely bare except for a few scraggly bushes and some wild grass. No trees, no structures, nothing. Just flat, open ground with good soil and a nice view of the hills in the distance. This is where our kitchen will be, I told my husband, walking to the spot marked on the plans. And over there, that's where the kids' bedrooms will go. We didn't have kids yet, but we were planning for them. 2 bedrooms for future children. A master bedroom for us. A living room with big windows to let in lots of light, and a kitchen where I could cook family dinners for years to come. The construction took about 7 months. We drove out there almost every single day to watch the progress. First came the foundation. Poured concrete that would hold everything else up. Then the framing wooden bones that showed us for the first time what the actual shape of our house would look like. Then the roof, the walls, the windows, the doors. Every single piece of that house was new. The lumber was fresh from the mill. The nails had never been hammered before. The windows had just been manufactured. There was no history in any of it. No previous owners. No one had ever lived on that land before us. At least not in modern times. Maybe Native Americans had camped there hundreds of years ago, but there were no records of any structures ever existing on that specific plot. That's important to understand. This wasn't some old Victorian house with a century of stories soaked into its walls. This wasn't a farmhouse where generations had lived and died. This was brand new, fresh, modern, built in 1971 with new materials and new techniques. We moved in on a sunny Saturday in October. The smell of fresh paint and new carpet filled every room. The appliances still had the protective plastic on them. The light fixtures were so shiny they hurt your eyes. Everything was perfect and clean and completely, utterly normal. For 8 years it stayed that way. We had 2 children in that time. Sarah was born in 1972 and Michael followed in 1974. They grew up in that house, learning to walk on those new floors, leaving handprints on those fresh walls. We had birthday parties and Christmas mornings and Sunday dinners. Normal family life in a normal family home. Nothing weird ever happened. Not once. No strange sounds, no unexplained events. Nothing that made us think twice. It was exactly what we'd built it to be, a solid, comfortable, completely ordinary house. But then, right around 1979 or 1980, things started to change. They were small things at first, so small that I'd dismissed them almost immediately, convinced myself I'd imagined it or that there was a logical explanation. Looking back now, I can see that's when it started. But at the time, each incident seemed like nothing, just little oddities that could happen in any house. The first thing I specifically remember was a night when I was alone in the living room. My husband had taken the kids to some kind of sports event, maybe soccer or baseball, I can't recall exactly. I'd stayed home because I had a headache and needed some quiet. I was sitting on the couch, reading a magazine, enjoying the peace. The house was completely silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall and the occasional car passing by outside. Then I felt it. A huge gust of air, strong and focused, hitting the back of my head. It wasn't a gentle breeze, it was forceful, like someone had blown hard on my hair with all their breath. The air parted my hair straight down the middle, right at the back of my head. I could feel it separate, strand by strand, as the breath moved through it. I spun around so fast I nearly gave myself whiplash. There was nothing behind me. Well, not nothing. Our entertainment cabinet was there about 6 inches away from the back of the couch. It held our video player, our amplifier for the stereo, a few record albums, some knickknacks, just furniture. But there was no space behind me. No room for a person. No window that could have created a draft. The nearest vent was on the opposite wall, and the heat wasn't even running. "Don't do that," I yelled at the empty room. The words came out before I could stop them. It was pure reflex, the kind of thing you'd snap at your kids if they snuck up behind you and scared you. But my kids weren't home. Nobody was home except me. I sat there for a long moment, my heart pounding, my hand on the back of my head where I could still feel the sensation of that breath parting my hair. I was trying to make sense of it, trying to find a rational explanation. Maybe it was the air conditioner kicking on, but we didn't have the AC running. It was autumn, cool outside. Maybe some weird pressure change in the house? But that doesn't create a focused stream of air strong enough to part someone's hair. I couldn't explain it. So I did what most people do when something happens that doesn't make sense. I decided it must have been my imagination. Maybe I'd dozed off for a second and dreamed it. Maybe I'd had a muscle spasm that felt like air moving. Maybe anything except what it actually felt like, which was someone standing directly behind me and blowing on my head. I went back to reading my magazine, but I kept glancing over my shoulder for the rest of the evening. Life went on normally after that. Weeks passed, maybe months. I forgot about the incident with the breath. Or rather, I pushed it to the back of my mind where I didn't have to think about it. Then came the winter night that I couldn't explain away. It was a Thursday, I remember, because Thursdays were always long days for me. I worked part-time at a local office, and Thursdays I had the late shift. I didn't get home until after 6, and then I had to make dinner, help the kids with homework, clean up the kitchen, all the usual evening routine. My husband had gone to bed early. He suffered from terrible migraines, the kind that make you sick to your stomach and sensitive to every bit of light and sound. When one hit, there was nothing to do but lie down in a dark room and wait it out. So he was already in bed by 7, and I was on my own with the evening tasks. The kids finished their homework and went to bed around 8:30. I still had dishes to wash, counters to wipe down, lunches to pack for the next day. By the time I finished in the kitchen, it was after 9. I was exhausted. All I wanted was to brush my teeth and crawl into bed next to my husband. I turned off the kitchen light and headed toward the hallway. That's when I noticed the living room light was still on. I could see it glowing from where I stood. That was odd because I was sure I'd turned off all the lights when I'd gotten the kids ready for bed. But I must have missed that one. Easy enough to do when you're tired. I walked into the living room to turn off the light. That's when I saw it. Our ceiling fan had a pull chain hanging down from it. You know the kind, a little metal chain with a wooden bead on the end that you pull to turn the fan on and off. That chain was swinging, not swinging a little bit. Swinging wildly, back and forth in a wide arc that didn't make any physical sense. I stopped in the doorway and stared at it. There was no air movement in the room. No fan running, no windows open, no heat kicking on. The house was completely still. But that chain was moving like someone had just grabbed it and yanked it hard. While I was standing there trying to process that, I noticed something else. Near our front door, we had a key holder mounted on the wall. It was one of those decorative wooden pieces with 4 hooks, one for each family member's set of keys. My keys, my husband's keys, Sarah's house key, and Michael's house key. One set of keys was swinging. Just one set. Not all of them. The others were hanging perfectly still. But one bunch was swinging back and forth, the metal keys clinking together with each swing. I stood frozen, watching these 2 things swing in perfect rhythm, the chain from the ceiling fan, the keys by the door, both moving wildly in a still, quiet room. My husband's snores drifted down the hallway from our bedroom. Deep, congested snores that meant he was completely knocked out by the migraine medicine. The kids were silent in their rooms, fast asleep. I was alone with whatever this was. "Hello?" I said quietly, feeling absolutely ridiculous. The swinging didn't stop. If anything, it got more pronounced. The chain was moving in such a wide arc now that I half expected it to wrap around the fan blade. I took a step backward, back into the hallway. That's when I heard our dog whimpering. Max was a big German shepherd, brave and protective and not afraid of anything. He barked at strangers, chased away raccoons, and once even faced down a coyote that had wandered into our yard. But right now he was at the back door, whining and pawing at it, desperate to come inside. I opened the door for him. He practically knocked me over trying to get in, then immediately pressed himself against my legs, trembling. "What's wrong, boy?" I asked, kneeling down to pet him. He wouldn't look at the living room. He kept his eyes fixed on me, his whole body shaking. I looked back toward the living room. The chain had stopped swinging. The keys were still now, too. Everything was motionless and quiet, like nothing had happened. But Max knew something had happened. He refused to go into the living room. Absolutely refused. When I tried to lead him toward his usual sleeping spot on the couch, he dug his paws into the floor and pulled back so hard he was practically sitting. Okay, I said. "You can sleep in our room tonight." I turned off the living room light and hurried down the hallway, Max glued to my side. I didn't look back. That night, Max lay on the mat at the foot of our bed. He didn't move all night. Normally, he was a restless sleeper, shifting positions, getting up for water, wandering around. But that night, he stayed completely still, like he was on guard duty. In the morning, my husband woke up feeling better. His migraine had passed. He took Max outside for his morning business, and I expected the dog to go right back to his normal self. But Max wouldn't go near the living room. Not that morning. Not for the next 3 days. "What's wrong with him?" my husband asked, watching our brave German shepherd walk the long way around through the kitchen just to avoid passing through the living room. "I don't know," I lied. "Because how do you tell your husband that you think something impossible happened in your living room? That you saw objects moving on their own? That you felt breath on the back of your head weeks ago and didn't mention it? You don't. You keep quiet and hope it doesn't happen again." But it did happen again. Not the same things, but other things. Small things that added up over time. Footsteps in the hallway when everyone was accounted for. The sound of someone walking, slow and measured, up and down the hall outside the bedrooms. I'd be doing dishes and hear it, clear as day. I'd dry my hands and go check, thinking maybe one of the kids had gotten up. But they'd both be in their rooms, doing homework or playing. And the footsteps would stop the moment I entered the hallway. Doors that we'd left open would be closed when we came back. Not slammed shut, just gently closed, like someone had pulled them shut carefully so they wouldn't make noise. The bathroom faucet would turn on by itself sometimes. I'd walk past and hear water running, go in to investigate, and find the cold water tap turned on full blast. Not dripping, not leaking, fully turned on. "The kids need to make sure they turn off the water completely," my husband would say. But I'd be the last one to use that bathroom, and I knew I'd turned it off. Objects would disappear and then reappear in strange places. I'd set my car keys on the kitchen counter, turn around to grab my purse, and the keys would be gone. I'd search everywhere, getting more and more frustrated. Then hours later, I'd find them in the bathroom, sitting on the edge of the sink. "You must have taken them in there and forgot," my husband would say, but I knew I hadn't. The kids started mentioning things too. Sarah said she heard someone call her name sometimes when she was in her room. A woman's voice, soft and kind, saying Sarah like a question. She'd come out asking what I wanted, and I'd have to tell her I hadn't called her. Michael said his toys would be arranged differently when he came back to his room. He'd leave his action figures scattered across the floor, go have lunch, and come back to find them lined up neatly along the windowsill. "Maybe you're just remembering wrong," I'd tell him, but he'd insist he hadn't touched them. My husband remained skeptical of all of it. He had explanations for everything. The footsteps were pipes expanding and contracting. The doors were closing because the house was settling. The faucet had a faulty washer. The missing objects were just us being forgetful. And maybe he was right. Maybe all of it could be explained. Except for the night I heard the music. It was a Saturday night, late. The kids were staying overnight at friends' houses, so my husband and I had the house to ourselves. We'd gone to bed early, both of us tired from a long week. I woke up around 2 in the morning to use the bathroom. As I was washing my hands, I heard it. Music. Faint, but definitely there. It sounded like it was coming from the living room. Not radio music, not TV. This was old music. Big band music, the kind my grandmother used to listen to. Trumpets and clarinets and a crooning male voice. I dried my hands and walked quietly toward the living room, my heart starting to pound. The music got louder as I got closer. Not loud enough to wake my husband, but definitely loud enough to hear clearly. Someone was playing big band music in my living room at 2 in the morning. I reached the doorway and looked in. The room was empty, dark. Nothing was on. The stereo wasn't running. The TV was off. But the music was still playing, filling the room. I stood there listening to it for maybe 30 seconds. A full verse of some song I didn't recognize. The singer had a smooth, warm voice. The band was playing something upbeat and jazzy. Then it just stopped. Not faded out, stopped. Like someone had lifted the needle off a record. The silence that followed was so complete it almost hurt my ears. I stood in the doorway for a long time, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. Finally, I made myself walk back to bed. I didn't tell my husband. What would I say? I heard music that wasn't there, but I knew what I'd heard. Things continued like that for years. Small incidents, none of them scary exactly, just unexplainable. We got used to it in a way. It became part of living in our house. We'd hear bumps in the night and just roll over and go back to sleep. We'd find objects moved and just shrug and put them back. The kids grew up thinking it was completely normal for houses to have a mind of their own. "Maybe it's friendly ghosts," Sarah said once when she was about 12. "There's no such thing as ghosts," my husband said automatically. But he didn't sound as convinced as he used to. Over time, we developed a kind of comfortable relationship with whatever was in our house. We never felt threatened. Nothing violent or scary ever happened. It was more like living with very quiet, very invisible roommates who occasionally reminded us they were there. We've lived in this house for over 50 years now. The kids grew up and moved away. We've remodeled parts of it, updated the kitchen, replaced the roof, modernized the bathrooms. But we've never moved. People ask us sometimes if we've ever thought about moving, getting a smaller place now that it's just the two of us. Maybe a nice condo somewhere with less maintenance. But this is our house. We built it. We raised our family here. And we're not alone here, even when it's just the two of us. Sometimes I still feel that breath on the back of my head. A gentle reminder that someone else is here too. Sometimes the chain on the ceiling fan swings for no reason. Just a little movement, like someone tapped it in passing. Sometimes we hear footsteps in the hallway late at night, soft and slow, like someone checking to make sure we're sleeping okay. And you know what? We're comfortable with it. We're comfortable with our residents, as I've come to think of them. They've been here almost as long as we have. Maybe they were here first in some way we don't understand. Maybe they came later, drawn to this place for reasons of their own. It doesn't matter. This is our home, and it's their home too. We still hear things that go bump in the night. But after 50 years, those bumps are as familiar as the sound of the refrigerator running or the heater kicking on. They're just part of the house, our house. The one we built from nothing but dirt and dreams and fresh lumber. The house that somehow impossibly came with its own history even though it had none. Next one's story start now. The angry man upstairs, how I finally confronted the ghost in my bedroom. I need to tell you about the thing that lived in my house for 17 years before I finally made it leave. This story still gives me chills when I think about it, especially the night I woke up and felt someone standing right next to my bed, watching me sleep in the darkness. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. Back in 2005, I bought a Cape Cod-style house in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Built in 1956, it had that classic mid-century charm with its steep roof and dormers. 4 bedrooms total, 2 upstairs and 2 down. Perfect for me and my 2 daughters, who were both preteens at the time. I was a single mom doing my best to raise 2 girls on my own. Money was tight, but I'd managed to scrape together enough for a down payment on this house. It felt like such an accomplishment. My own home. A place where my daughters could grow up, have their own rooms, make memories. The house had been on the market for a while, which should have been my first clue that something was off. But the price was right, the location was good, and I didn't ask too many questions. I was just happy to be a homeowner. When we first walked through the house before buying it, I remember getting a weird feeling upstairs. Nothing I could put my finger on exactly. Just a sense of unease, like the air was heavier up there. The real estate agent kept talking about the charm of the dormers and the original hardwood floors, but I found myself wanting to hurry back downstairs. Still, I pushed those feelings aside. Old houses always feel a little creepy when they're empty, right? Once we got our furniture in and made it feel like home, that weird atmosphere would go away. I had what I thought was a brilliant parenting strategy. My daughters would take the 2 bedrooms upstairs, and I'd stay in one of the bedrooms on the main floor. That way, when they became teenagers and tried to sneak out at night, they'd have to come down the stairs and I'd hear them. I could catch them before they got out the front door. It didn't occur to me that they could just climb out their bedroom windows. Teenage me would have figured that out immediately, but somehow parent me missed that possibility. Like I said, it seemed brilliant at the time. We moved in on a Saturday in late summer. The girls were excited about their new rooms. They'd already planned how they'd decorate, what posters they'd hang up, where their beds would go. I was excited too, exhausted from moving boxes all day, but happy. That first night, we all slept in our new bedrooms for the first time. I fell asleep almost immediately, worn out from the physical labor of moving. The next morning, my oldest daughter came downstairs looking tired and unsettled. "Mom, my room is haunted," she announced, standing in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed. I was making coffee, barely awake myself. "What are you talking about?" "My ceiling fan. The blades were moving on their own last night." I laughed. Not meanly, just the way you laugh when your kid says something ridiculous. "Honey, it was probably just the wind. The windows weren't open," she insisted. "I'm telling you, the blades were moving by themselves. Slowly, like someone was pushing them. Maybe there's a draft in the room. Old houses are drafty." She stared at me for a moment, then shrugged and went to get cereal. But I could tell she wasn't convinced by my explanation. I didn't think much about it at the time. Kids have active imaginations, especially in a new house. Every creak and settling sound becomes something spooky. She'd get used to it. But over the next few weeks, I started noticing things myself. Little things that I tried to brush off. The atmosphere upstairs really was different from downstairs. Heavier somehow. Cooler, even though heat rises and it should have been warmer up there. Every time I went upstairs to put away laundry or check on the girls, I felt this subtle sense of not being welcome. Like I was intruding on someone's space. My younger daughter's room was the worst. It was the bedroom at the far end of the upstairs hallway, tucked under one of the dormers. Whenever I went in there, my skin would prickle. The air felt thick and stale, even with the windows open. I found myself avoiding that room, making excuses not to go in there. "Can you put your own laundry away?" I'd tell her, standing in the hallway with her folded clothes. "Just this once?" She'd give me a confused look, but take the laundry. I never explained why I didn't want to walk those extra 10 feet into her room. About 2 months after we moved in, my younger daughter came to me with the same complaint as her sister. "Mom, my ceiling fan moves by itself." I was doing dishes when she said it, and I didn't even turn around. "Not you too. Your sister already tried this. I'm serious. The blades move, and then they stop, and then they move in the opposite direction, like someone is playing with them." I dried my hands and turned to look at her. She was completely serious, no hint of joking on her face. "Honey, there's a logical explanation. Maybe the fan motor is going bad. Maybe there's something wrong with the electrical system. Old houses have quirks. It's not the motor, Mom. I'm telling you, something weird is happening up there." I sighed. "Even if something weird is happening, what exactly do you want me to do about it? Call a Ghostbuster?" She was a dramatic kid anyway, prone to exaggeration and making mountains out of molehills. I figured this was just more of the same, so I dismissed her concerns, just like I'd dismissed her sisters. Both girls eventually stopped mentioning it. They stopped complaining about the ceiling fans, stopped telling me their rooms felt creepy. I thought that meant they'd gotten used to the house, adjusted to the normal sounds and quirks of an older building. But looking back now, I think they just realized I wasn't going to take them seriously, so they stopped trying. I should have listened. I should have paid attention. But I was busy working full-time, managing the household, trying to keep everything together as a single parent. I didn't have the mental energy to worry about ceiling fans moving on their own, even though I started hearing things myself. Footsteps upstairs when both girls were at school, clear, distinct footsteps, like someone wearing shoes walking across the wooden floors. I'd be downstairs doing laundry or making dinner, and I'd hear it. Step, 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 walking from one bedroom to the other. The first few times it happened, I'd holler up the stairs, "Girls, are you home?" No answer. I'd go upstairs to check. Both bedrooms empty, both girls still at school, just like I knew they were. It happened so often that I started to just ignore it. I'd hear the footsteps and wouldn't even bother checking anymore. Just some weird acoustics in the house, I told myself. Maybe it was the house settling. Maybe it was sounds from outside somehow echoing through the structure. Maybe it was anything except what it sounded like, which was someone walking around upstairs when nobody was there. The years went by. The girls grew into teenagers just like I'd predicted. My oldest daughter graduated high school and moved out to go to college. My younger daughter was thrilled because she immediately claimed her sister's bedroom, which was bigger and had better natural light. Both girls had long since stopped mentioning anything weird about the upstairs. I figured whatever phase they'd been going through, they'd outgrown it. Or maybe they'd just gotten so used to the strangeness that it didn't bother them anymore. I still felt uncomfortable going up there, especially into what had been my younger daughter's original room. But I pushed through it. A person can get used to anything if they're exposed to it long enough. One afternoon, my youngest daughter and I were in the kitchen together. She was home from school, sitting at the table doing homework while I prepared dinner. We were talking about something ordinary, probably her day at school or plans for the weekend. Then we both heard it. A loud thump from the living room. We looked at each other. I put down the knife I'd been using to chop vegetables. "What was that?" she asked. "I don't know. Stay here." I walked into the living room, my daughter following behind me despite my instruction for her to stay put. My heavy Waterford crystal clock, which normally sat on the sofa table, was lying on the floor, not next to the table, not directly in front of it. The clock was several feet away from the table, sitting in the middle of the floor, like someone had carried it there and set it down. I picked it up carefully, examining it. There was a chip on the base now, a piece of crystal broken off where it had hit the floor. "How did that happen?" my daughter asked, her voice quiet. "It must have fallen off the table somehow." "Mom, look at where it was sitting. There's no way it just fell. It would have landed right next to the table, not way over there." She was right. For the clock to end up where it did, it would have had to launch itself off the table with some force. Either that or someone would have had to pick it up and throw it. But we were the only two people in the house. And we'd both been in the kitchen when it happened. "I don't know how it happened," I said, more sharply than I intended. "But now my clock is chipped, and I'm pissed about it." I put the clock back on the table and went back to making dinner. But my hands were shaking a little as I picked up the knife. My daughter didn't say anything, but I caught her glancing toward the living room several times during dinner, like she expected to see something there. Time continued to pass. My oldest daughter had graduated college and had a baby, my first grandchild. She'd named her Lily, and Lily was the light of my life. She spent a lot of time at my house, especially as she got older and I could babysit while her mom worked. Lily was about 2.5 when she started talking in full sentences. She was a bright, observant child, always asking questions about everything. One day, she was playing in the living room while I made lunch. She suddenly looked up at me with those big, serious eyes. "Grandma, who is the mean man?" I smiled at her. "What mean man, sweetie? The mean man in your house. Who is he?" My smile faded. "There is no man in my house, honey. It's just Grandma here." She pointed toward the stairs. "Yes, there is. The mean man." I felt a chill run down my spine, but I forced myself to stay calm. "You're just imagining things, sweetheart. There's no man here." She went back to playing with her toys, but she'd glance toward the stairs every few minutes like she was checking to see if someone was there. I called my youngest daughter that evening and mentioned it, trying to make it sound funny. Lily said the funniest thing today. She asked me who the mean man in my house was. Kids and their imaginations, right? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Mom," my daughter said carefully, "did you see where she was, pointing when she said it?" "Toward the stairs, I think." "Why?" "When I was there last week, she said the same thing. And when I asked her where the mean man was, she pointed at the upstairs window. The one in what used to be my bedroom." I didn't know what to say to that. We both sat there in silence for a moment. "Mom, I think there really is something up there. I always thought so, even when you didn't believe me. Even if there is something," I said, "what am I supposed to do about it? I can't afford to move. This is my home." "I know. I'm just saying. Maybe take it seriously now." But I didn't. Not really. I filed it away in my mind as just another weird thing about the house. Unsettling, yes, but not dangerous. Whatever was up there, if anything was up there, it hadn't hurt anyone. It just made people uncomfortable. Eventually, my youngest daughter moved out too. She got her own apartment with her boyfriend, and I was alone in the house for the first time in nearly 2 decades. The house felt bigger when it was just me, emptier. The sounds were more noticeable when there was no one else around to cover them up. I'd hear those footsteps upstairs almost every night now. Sometimes I'd hear doors closing when I hadn't left any doors open. Sometimes I'd hear what sounded like furniture being moved, heavy scraping sounds across the floor. But I never went up there at night to check. I stayed downstairs in my bedroom, door closed, TV on to cover the sounds from above. During the day, I'd go upstairs and everything would be exactly as I'd left it. No furniture out of place. No doors standing open that should be closed. Nothing to explain the sounds I'd heard the night before. After about a year of living alone, I decided I was tired of avoiding the upstairs. This was my house, all of it. I'd paid the mortgage for 17 years. I'd raised my children here. It was time to claim the master bedroom upstairs for myself. My oldest daughter and boyfriend were going through a rough patch financially, so I'd offered to let them live with me for a while until they got back on their feet. Her boyfriend Marcus was Native American and had grown up with a very different understanding of spirits and energy than I had. "Marcus, can you help me prepare the upstairs bedrooms?" I asked one Saturday morning. I'm going to move my bedroom up there, and I want to get it cleaned and painted first." "Sure, Miss Julie, happy to help." We went upstairs together, and I watched as he walked into what had been my youngest daughter's original bedroom, the one that had always felt the worst to me. He stopped just inside the doorway. His face went pale, then slightly green. He put his hand on the door frame to steady himself. "Marcus, are you okay?" "Miss Julie," he said quietly, "the vibes in this room are really bad. Really bad. I actually feel sick." "What do you mean?" "There's something here. Something angry. The energy is so negative it's making me nauseous." I'd known Marcus for 2 years at this point. He wasn't dramatic. He wasn't the type to make things up or exaggerate. If he said he felt sick from the energy in the room, I believed him. "What can we do about it?" I asked. "I need to smudge it. Burn some sage and cleanse the space. It won't get rid of whatever is here, not permanently, but it'll clear the energy enough that I can work in here without getting sick." He went home and came back with a bundle of dried sage and some kind of shell to burn it in. He walked through both upstairs bedrooms, paying special attention to the corners and the closets, letting the smoke fill the space. When he was done, the atmosphere did feel lighter. Not good exactly, but better. Breathable. "That should hold for a while," he said. "But Miss Julie, I'm telling you, whatever is up here is not happy. It's angry about something. Maybe angry at you specifically, maybe just angry at the world. I don't know. But be careful." "I'll be fine," I assured him. "I've lived here for 17 years. If it was going to hurt me, it would have done it by now." We spent the next few weeks preparing the upstairs. We scraped old wallpaper and painted fresh coats of a soft blue-gray color. We pulled up the old carpet and refinished the hardwood floors underneath. We replaced the light fixtures and updated the bathroom. By the time we were done, the upstairs looked beautiful. Modern and fresh, and nothing like it had looked when I'd first bought the house. I moved my furniture up there, excited to finally have the master bedroom with the nice big closet and the attached bathroom. I set up my bed, my dresser, my nightstands. I hung my clothes in the closet. I arranged my books on the shelves. This was my room now, my space. The first night I slept up there, everything was fine. I was tired from moving furniture all day, and I fell asleep almost immediately. The second night was different. I woke up suddenly at 3 in the morning. The television had turned on by itself, not to static or to the last channel I'd been watching. It was on the Home Shopping Network, volume turned up loud enough to startle me awake. I grabbed the remote and turned it off, my heart pounding. Then I checked the TV settings, thinking maybe I had accidentally set a timer. My granddaughter liked to play with the remote when she visited. Maybe she'd programmed it to turn on. But when I looked through all the settings, there was no timer function. No sleep timer, no wake-up timer, nothing. This TV didn't have the ability to turn itself on automatically. I unplugged it before going back to sleep. The next day, I called my youngest daughter and told her what happened. There was a pause, then she started laughing. Not a happy laugh. A knowing laugh. "Welcome to the upstairs, Mom. The lights used to turn on all the time in the middle of the night. Usually around 3 a.m. I thought you knew that. You never told me." "I did tell you, Mom. When I was 14, you said it was probably just a faulty switch." I had said that. I remembered now, and I'd never followed up, never checked, never taken her seriously. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I should have believed you." "Yeah, well, now you know." That night I was lying in bed reading when I heard it. Footsteps in the hallway right outside my door. Slow, heavy footsteps. Not like someone walking with purpose. More like someone pacing. Back and forth, right outside my bedroom. I got up and opened the door. The hallway was empty. The footsteps stopped the moment I opened the door. "Hello?" I called out. Nothing. I closed the door and went back to bed. A few minutes later, the footsteps started again. This went on for over an hour. Footsteps, I'd open the door, they'd stop. I'd close the door, they'd start again. Finally, I left the door open. The footsteps stopped completely. But now I couldn't sleep with my bedroom door open. The hallway was dark, and I kept imagining I saw movement out there. shadows shifting, the sense of someone standing just out of sight. I lasted 3 more nights like that before I decided to get professional help. I'd heard about a local psychic named Richard, who sometimes worked with the police to help solve crimes. He had a good reputation, and people said he was the real deal, not a con artist. I called him and asked if he'd come to my house. I didn't tell him why. I didn't mention any of the incidents or give him any information beyond my address. He arrived on a Thursday afternoon. He was an older man, maybe in his 60s, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. We sat in my living room and talked for a few minutes about nothing important. Then he closed his eyes and sat quietly for a moment. "You have an entity in your house," he said, opening his eyes and looking at me. "An angry male spirit. He occupies the upstairs almost exclusively." My mouth went dry. "Can you tell me anything else about him? He's disabled in some way. He has trouble with stairs, or at least he did when he was alive. He spent most of his time upstairs because he couldn't easily navigate going up and down. And he's very resentful about it. Angry at his limitations, angry at the world, angry at anyone who can move freely when he couldn't." I thought about those heavy, slow footsteps I'd heard. Not the quick steps of a child or a healthy adult. Heavier, more labored. "There's something else," Richard said, "the room between the 2 bedrooms. It's a bathroom now, isn't it?" "Yes. It used to be a closet, a walk-in closet. He spent time in there. I don't know why, but I see him in that space a lot." I felt chills run down my arms. There was no way he could have known that. The bathroom had been remodeled decades ago, long before I bought the house. But when I'd been replacing the flooring, I'd found evidence that it had been a closet originally. The door frame had been moved. The floor in there was different from the floors in the bedrooms. "What should I do?" I asked. "Sometimes when an entity knows that I'm aware of them, they'll leave on their own. They don't like being seen, being identified. So it's possible he'll go now that I've been here and called him out. And if he doesn't, then you tell him to leave, firmly. Make it clear that this is your home and he's not welcome anymore." Richard left, and I sat in my living room for a long time thinking about what he'd said. Part of me wanted to dismiss it all as nonsense. But he'd known things he couldn't have known. About the closet, about the disability. That night I went upstairs to bed with a sense of dread in my stomach. I need to tell you something about me. One of my biggest fears in life, the thing that has terrified me since I was a little girl, is the idea of waking up in the dark and finding someone standing over me, looking down at me while I sleep, vulnerable and unaware. I've had nightmares about it my entire life. Someone in my room, standing next to my bed, watching me. It's a primal fear, the kind that makes your skin crawl and your heart race even just thinking about it. I tell you this so you understand why what happened next was so specifically, personally terrifying for me. I was asleep, deeply asleep, dreaming about something I can't remember now. Then I woke up, not gradually, not the slow drift from sleep to wakefulness. I woke up instantly, completely, like someone had flipped a switch, and I felt it immediately. Someone was standing next to my bed. I couldn't see anyone. The room was dark, just the faint glow of the streetlight coming through the curtains. When I looked toward the spot where I felt the presence, there was nothing there. But I could feel them, as clearly as I've ever felt anything in my life. Someone was standing right next to my bed, leaning over me, looking down at me. The air in that spot was colder, denser. I could feel the weight of their attention on me, heavy and oppressive. Every hair on my body stood up. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might have a heart attack right there. And I was angry. Not just scared, furious. This was my house, my bedroom, my safe space. And something was violating that, invading my privacy, deliberately triggering my worst fear. I sat straight up in bed. "GET out!" I screamed into the darkness. "GET out of my house. You're not welcome here. GET out!" I yelled it over and over, probably loud enough to wake the neighbors. I didn't care. "This is my house. You have no right to be here. GET out. Leave. Now, the presence retreated. I felt it pull back, move away from the bed. The cold spot disappeared. The weight of that attention lifted. The air in the room felt lighter, clearer. I sat there in bed, breathing hard, shaking with adrenaline and anger and relief. "I mean it," I said more quietly. "You need to leave. This is my home. You're not welcome anymore." I don't know if I imagined it, but I thought I heard footsteps going down the stairs. Slow, heavy footsteps. And then the sound of a door closing somewhere far away. I didn't sleep for the rest of that night. I sat up in bed with all the lights on, waiting for the presence to return. It didn't. That was almost a year ago now. And I haven't felt that presence in my house ever since. The footsteps stopped. The lights and TV don't turn on by themselves anymore. My granddaughter doesn't ask about the mean man. The atmosphere upstairs feels normal now, just like the atmosphere downstairs. Whatever was here is gone. I don't know if it was Richard identifying it that made it leave, or if it was me finally standing up and demanding that it go. Maybe it was both. Maybe the combination of being seen and being rejected was enough to convince it that it couldn't stay anymore. I still burn sage sometimes, just to be safe. Marcus showed me how to do it properly, and I keep bundles of it in my closet. Every few months, I'll walk through the upstairs rooms with the smoking sage, just as a precaution. But I don't think I need to anymore. The house feels like it's truly mine now, all of it. No more cold spots, no more heavy atmosphere, no more feeling like I'm sharing my space with something angry and resentful. A few people have gotten upset with me when I tell this story, asking how I could let my daughters suffer upstairs for all those years, but only took action when it affected me personally. I want to address that because it's a fair question. First, I did offer both girls the chance to switch bedrooms with me, multiple times. They could have had the bedrooms downstairs, and I would have moved upstairs, but they always said no. The upstairs bedrooms were bigger, with more privacy, farther from my room so they could stay up later or talk on the phone without me hearing. If it had been truly terrible for them, they would have taken me up on that offer. The fact that they didn't tells me their experience wasn't as intense as mine. And second, their experience really was different from mine. I've asked them about it since all this happened. They heard things. They saw the ceiling fans move. They felt uncomfortable sometimes. But neither of them ever had the experience I did, of waking up to something standing over their bed. My youngest daughter said she always felt like something was watching her, but from a distance. Not right in her personal space. My oldest said she sometimes felt annoyed by the presence, like having a younger sibling who was trying to get attention, irritating but not threatening. What I experienced was different, more aggressive, more personal, more invasive. I don't know why the entity escalated with me. Maybe because I'd finally moved into what it considered its territory. Maybe because I was older and it thought I was an easier target. Maybe because I'd ignored it for so long and it was angry about being dismissed. I don't have all the answers. I probably never will. But I do know this, that house is mine now, completely mine. And I'm never letting anything take it from me again. I sleep peacefully in my upstairs bedroom now. I walk through every room of my house without fear or discomfort. I've reclaimed my space. And if anything ever tries to take it from me again, I know what to do. I'll stand up, I'll get angry, and I'll tell it to leave. Because this is my house. And no ghost, no spirit, no entity has more right to be here than I do. And nope. Next one's story start now. The playful ghost on my farm. When things started disappearing and reappearing, I need to tell you about the strange thing that started happening on my farm about a month ago. For 16 years I've lived here completely alone. Never once experiencing anything I couldn't explain. But now something is playing hide and seek with my belongings, and I'm starting to think I might not be as alone as I thought. Let me give you some background first, so you understand why this is so bizarre for me. I bought this farm in 2006. 40 acres of rolling hills, a small farmhouse built in the 1940s, a barn that had seen better days, and enough land to keep a few horses. It was everything I'd ever wanted. After spending my whole life living in apartments and suburban houses, with neighbors close enough to hear through the walls, I finally had space, privacy, peace and quiet. The farmhouse itself is simple. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that opens into a living room, and a small office that I converted from what used to be a dining room. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. The previous owners had lived here for 30 years before selling to me. They were an elderly couple who'd raised their kids here and were downsizing to move closer to their grandchildren. When I did the walkthrough before buying, the wife gave me a tour and told me stories about the place. How they'd celebrated every Christmas in the living room. How their kids had learned to ride bikes on the long driveway. How peaceful and quiet it was. How safe they'd always felt here. "You'll love it," she told me with a warm smile. "This house has good energy. It's been a happy place for us. And it was a happy place for me too." I settled in quickly, got my 2 horses situated in the barn, adopted a couple of barn cats to keep the mice under control, and started my new life as a hobby farmer. I work from home as a software consultant, which was perfect for farm life. I could do my job from anywhere with an internet connection, and living on the farm meant I could take breaks throughout the day to check on the horses, do chores, and enjoy the outdoor space. My routine became very predictable over the years. I'm a creature of habit, the type of person who likes everything in its place. I wake up at the same time every morning, feed the horses at the same time, eat lunch at my desk at noon, and finish work around 5. Then I do evening chores, make dinner, and relax for the evening. Everything has its spot in my house. My coffee mug goes on the second shelf in the cabinet to the left of the sink. My keys hang on a hook by the back door. My checkbook stays in the top drawer of the desk in my office. My wooden peanut bowl lives in the cabinet next to the stove. That bowl is important to this story, so let me tell you about it. It's a big wooden bowl, probably 8 inches across, made from some kind of dark wood, maybe walnut. I bought it at a craft fair years ago because I liked the smooth, worn look of it. I use it for eating peanuts while I watch TV in the evening. It's one of my simple pleasures. I'll shell peanuts into a smaller bowl and eat them while watching whatever show I'm binge-watching at the moment. I use that bowl 2 or 3 times a week, every single week. After I'm done, I wash it, dry it immediately because you're not supposed to let wooden bowls air dry, and put it back in the cabinet. Same spot every time. Right-hand side of the bottom shelf, next to the mixing bowls. About a month ago, I went to get the bowl for my evening peanuts. I opened the cabinet, reached for the spot where it always sits, and my hand met empty air. I bent down to look. Not there. "That's weird," I muttered to myself. I checked the other shelves in that cabinet. Not there either. I checked the cabinet on the other side of the stove. Nope. I checked the dish drainer by the sink, thinking maybe I'd washed it and forgotten to put it away. The dish drainer was empty. I always put my dishes away immediately after washing them. I've done it that way for years. I can't stand the look of dishes sitting in a drainer, so I wash something and put it away right after. The drainer is always empty unless I'm actively washing dishes. No bowl in the drainer, no bowl in any of the cabinets. I started searching the whole kitchen, under the sink, in the pantry, on top of the refrigerator where I sometimes put things temporarily, in the drawers, even though that made no sense. Nothing. Where did I put that thing? I asked the empty kitchen. I tried to remember the last time I'd used it. A few days ago, I thought. I'd washed it and put it away like always. Hadn't I? Maybe I was misremembering. Maybe it had been longer. Maybe I'd put it somewhere else and forgotten. I expanded my search to the living room. Not on the coffee table, not on the end tables, not on the bookshelf. I checked my bedroom, my bathroom, even my office. I looked in completely illogical places, the kind of places you check when you're getting desperate. The linen closet, the coat closet, the bathroom cabinet, no wooden bowl anywhere. Then I had a terrible thought. What if I'd accidentally thrown it away? I went outside to check the garbage can. I'd just taken the trash out 2 days before, so the can wasn't very full. I pulled out the bag and went through it piece by piece, right there in my driveway, feeling completely ridiculous. No bowl, just normal trash. Coffee grounds, food scraps, junk mail, empty containers. I tied the bag back up and put it in the can, now thoroughly confused. Where could a wooden bowl go? It's not like it could walk away on its own. I lived alone. I hadn't had any visitors in weeks. The cats couldn't have moved it, it was way too big for them to carry. For 3 days I searched on and off. I'd be working at my computer and suddenly think of a new place to check. The storage closet, behind the couch, in the barn, in case I'd carried it out there for some reason I couldn't remember. Nothing. The bowl had simply vanished. On the 4th day, I gave up. I decided the bowl was just gone somehow, and I'd need to buy a new one eventually. It was frustrating, but what else could I do? I'd looked everywhere multiple times. That afternoon I came in from feeding the horses. It was around 5:30, still light outside but getting toward evening. I was sweaty and dirty from mucking stalls, so I headed straight to the kitchen sink to wash my hands. I turned on the water, pumped some soap into my hands, and glanced at the dish drainer while I lathered up. My wooden peanut bowl was sitting in the dish drainer. I froze, my soapy hands under the running water, staring at it. The bowl was sitting right there, exactly in the center of the metal drainer, as if someone had just washed it and set it there to dry. But I hadn't washed it. I hadn't even found it to be able to wash it. I rinsed my hands slowly, my eyes never leaving the bowl. I turned off the water and stood there dripping onto the floor. "What the hell?" I whispered. I picked up the bowl, examining it closely. It was definitely my bowl. Same dark wood, same size, same slight crack on one side that I'd always meant to fix with wood glue but never got around to. It was bone dry, like it had been sitting there for a while, not wet or damp like a recently washed dish. I looked around the kitchen as if I expected to see someone standing there smiling at their prank. But of course the kitchen was empty. The whole house was empty. It had been empty when I left to do chores, and it was still empty now. I started laughing, not because anything was funny, but because what else do you do when something impossible happens? I laughed until my sides hurt, standing in my kitchen holding a wooden bowl that had been missing for 3 days, and had now mysteriously reappeared in my dish drainer. "Okay," I said out loud to my empty kitchen. "Okay, thank you. Thank you to whoever brought this back. I appreciate it. This is very weird, but thank you." I felt ridiculous talking to no one, but it also felt like the right thing to do. If something or someone had taken my bowl and then returned it, the polite thing was to say thank you. I dried the bowl thoroughly with a dish towel and put it back in its proper spot in the cabinet. Then I went about my evening, as normal, though I kept glancing at the cabinet to make sure the bowl was still there. It stayed put. No more disappearing. I told myself it was just one weird incident. Maybe I'd had some kind of mental lapse and put the bowl somewhere strange, then moved it to the drainer while I was on autopilot and didn't remember doing it. People do weird things sometimes without realizing it, except I knew that wasn't what had happened. I'd searched that kitchen thoroughly, including the dish drainer, multiple times over those 3 days. The bowl had not been there, and then suddenly it was. But I pushed the thoughts away and tried to forget about it. A week later, my farrier came out to trim my horse's hooves. His name is Jake, and he's been taking care of my horses for years. He comes every 6 to 8 weeks for regular trimming and shoe replacement when needed. Jake is one of the few people I write checks to. Everything else I pay online or with a credit card, but Jake prefers checks. So I keep a checkbook specifically for paying him and the occasional other service that requires a paper check. When Jake finished with the horses, he came up to the house to get paid. I told him to give me just a minute and went to get my checkbook from the desk in my office. I pulled open the top drawer where I always keep it. The checkbook wasn't there. I moved things around in the drawer, pens, paper clips, sticky notes, stamps, no checkbook. "That's weird," I muttered, pulling the drawer all the way out to see if it had slid to the back. Nope, not there. I checked the other drawers in the desk. Not there. I checked the shelf above the desk where I keep reference books and binders. Not there. Jake was waiting outside. I felt embarrassed making him wait while I searched for my checkbook. Jake, I'm so sorry. I called out the window. I can't find my checkbook. Do you take Venmo? No, sorry, I'm old school. Just checks or cash. Okay, hang on, let me see if I have enough cash. I checked my wallet. $65. Jake's fee was $70. I checked the jar in the kitchen where I keep emergency cash. Another $20. I went back outside and paid him with the cash, apologizing for the inconvenience. No problem, Jake said cheerfully. You can just pay me the extra $5 next time. After he left, I went back inside, frustrated and confused. Where was my checkbook? I started searching the house systematically, every drawer in every room, every shelf, every surface where I might have set it down temporarily. I checked my car in case I'd taken it with me somewhere and left it in there. Not there. I checked my bedroom, my bathroom, the kitchen. I looked in the refrigerator and the freezer because sometimes people put things in weird places when they're distracted. Nothing. I checked the barn thinking maybe I'd carried it out there for some inexplicable reason. Nope, the checkbook was simply gone. Oh, come on, I said out loud, not again, what is happening? I didn't say thank you this time. I was too annoyed. First the bowl, now the checkbook. Something was messing with me, and I didn't appreciate it. I gave up searching after about an hour and decided I'd just order new checks online if the checkbook didn't turn up in a few days. Life went on. I worked during the week, did my chores, took care of the horses. The whole time, I kept my eyes open for the checkbook, checking random spots whenever I thought of a new place it might be. Nothing. It stayed missing. Since the virus started, I'd been working from home full-time instead of just most of the time. My company had sent everyone home, and we'd all shifted to remote work. I was using my laptop every single day, multiple times a day for video calls and working on projects. I keep my laptop on the desk in my office during the workday, but at night I put it away on a shelf in the living room. I started doing this because my cats kept sitting on it when it was on the desk, warming themselves on the keyboard and stepping on keys. One of them had managed to send a very embarrassing gibberish email to my entire team by walking across the keyboard while I was in the bathroom. So now, every evening after I finish work, I close the laptop, carry it to the living room, and put it on a specific shelf of my bookcase. A shelf that's too high for the cats to easily jump to. Then every morning, I retrieve it and bring it back to my desk. I'd been doing this for months. It was part of my routine. Put away laptop, do evening chores, make dinner, relax. This past Monday, I finished my workday around 5. I closed my laptop, carried it to the living room, and went to place it on the shelf. My checkbook was sitting on the shelf, right in the spot where I put my laptop every single day. I stood there holding my laptop, staring at the checkbook in complete disbelief. That shelf was empty every morning when I retrieved my laptop. I knew it was empty because I looked at it every single morning. And it had been empty that very morning, less than 8 hours ago. But now there was a checkbook sitting right in the middle of the shelf. I set down my laptop carefully on the shelf next to the checkbook, then picked up the checkbook and examined it. It was definitely mine. Same navy blue cover, same account number printed on the checks inside, same register with my handwriting, recording the last few checks I'd written. It was just sitting there, as if it had always been there, as if I was crazy for thinking it had been missing. Okay, I said out loud. Okay. I see what's happening here. I looked around the living room, feeling both grateful and exasperated. Thank you for returning my checkbook. I really appreciate it, but I'd also appreciate it if you'd stop taking my things in the first place. The house was silent. My cats were outside somewhere. It was just me and whoever or whatever was playing games with my belongings. I'm glad you're here, if you are here, I continued, feeling only slightly ridiculous now, and I'm grateful that you return the things you borrow. But this is kind of stressful for me, so maybe we could work something out where you don't take things anymore? No response, obviously. Just the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall and the sound of wind rustling through the trees outside. I took the checkbook and put it back in its proper place in the desk drawer. Then I went about my evening routine, but My mind was racing. 2 incidents, both following the exact same pattern. Something goes missing from its usual spot. I search everywhere and can't find it. Days pass. Then the item reappears in a completely obvious place where it definitely wasn't before. This wasn't me being forgetful or absent-minded. This was something else. Something I couldn't explain with logic or reason. I've never been a particularly superstitious person. I don't believe in fortune tellers or astrology or any of that stuff. But I also can't deny what's happening in my own house. Something is here with me. Something that can move objects around. Something that seems to like playing hide and seek with my belongings. The thing is, I'm not scared. Maybe I should be, but I'm not. Whatever this is, it doesn't feel threatening. It feels more playful than anything else, like a bored kid who's discovered a new game. And it brings things back. That's important. It's not stealing, it's borrowing. Taking something for a few days, then carefully returning it to a place where I'll definitely find it. I've been thinking a lot about who or what this might be. The farmhouse is old, built in the 1940s. Plenty of time for people to have lived and died here. The previous owners never mentioned anything paranormal, but maybe it never bothered them. Or maybe it's new, something that's only recently become active. Or maybe I'm going crazy and imagining all of this. But how do you imagine something that leaves physical evidence? The bowl was really missing and really reappeared. The checkbook was really missing and really reappeared. I didn't dream that. It happened. I've started talking out loud when I'm alone in the house, which is basically all the time. Just little comments here and there, acknowledging whatever presence might be listening. Good morning, I'll say when I come downstairs to make coffee. Hope you slept well if you sleep. Or I'm going out to feed the horses now. I'll be back in about an hour. Or I'm making spaghetti for dinner. Wish I could offer you some. I feel ridiculous doing it, but it also feels right somehow. Like it's the polite thing to do when you're sharing your home with someone, even if that someone isn't exactly alive in the traditional sense. My cats have started acting differently too. They'll sometimes stare at empty corners of rooms, their eyes tracking something I can't see. They'll suddenly perk up and watch something move across the ceiling, their heads turning to follow whatever it is. Last week I was sitting on the couch watching TV, and both cats were curled up next to me. Suddenly they both lifted their heads at the exact same time and looked toward the kitchen doorway. They sat there, completely focused on that doorway, for about 30 seconds. Then they relaxed and went back to sleep, as if whatever they'd been watching had left. I've also noticed that the house feels different lately. Not bad different, just more alive somehow, like there's more energy in it. Sometimes I'll walk into a room and get the distinct feeling that someone just left, like I've just missed them by seconds. And sometimes late at night when I'm lying in bed reading, I'll hear soft sounds from other parts of the house. Not scary sounds, just gentle noises. A door closing quietly, footsteps in the hallway, the creak of a floorboard in the living room. I'll call out good night to whoever or whatever it is, and then go back to my book. I wondered whether I should be doing something more about this. Should I call a priest, a medium, a paranormal investigator? Should I be trying to get rid of whatever this is? But honestly, I don't want to. As weird as this situation is, I'm comfortable with it. I've lived alone on this farm for 16 years, and I've been content with the solitude. But maybe I was lonelier than I realized. Maybe having this presence here, whatever it is actually kind of nice. I have someone to talk to now, even if they don't talk back. Someone who shares my space, who notices when I'm here and when I'm gone. Someone who apparently cares enough to return the things they borrow. Yesterday I couldn't find my favorite coffee mug, the big blue one I use every morning. I searched for about 10 minutes, then gave up and used a different mug. Okay, I said out loud with a smile. You can borrow the mug, but please bring it back when you're done, okay? It's my favorite. This morning the mug was sitting on the kitchen counter right next to the coffee maker, exactly where I'd looked yesterday, and it definitely wasn't there. Thank you, I said, picking it up and pouring my coffee into it. I appreciate you returning it. I've accepted this as my new normal. living alone on a farm with a playful ghost who likes to borrow things. Could be worse. At least whatever it is has good manners and doesn't break anything. My friends would think I'm crazy if I told them about this. They already think I'm a little odd for living way out here all by myself. No neighbors for miles, just me and my horses and my cats. If I told them I also have a ghost who plays hide and seek with my belongings, they'd probably suggest I see a therapist, or maybe insist on it. But I know what I'm experiencing is real, and I'm okay with it. More than okay, actually. I'm kind of enjoying having this mysterious presence in my life. So if you're reading this and thinking I should be terrified or trying to get rid of whatever is in my house, I appreciate the concern. But I'm good. Really. This is very unusual for me, accepting something I can't explain or understand. But life is full of mysteries, and some mysteries are better left alone, especially when they're not hurting anyone. Whatever you are, whoever you are, thanks for keeping me company. Thanks for returning my things. And thanks for making life on this farm just a little bit more interesting. Just please, if you're going to borrow something, maybe leave a note or something so I know not to panic and tear the house apart looking for it. Probably asking too much. But hey, worth a try. Next one's story start now. The night terror in Varna, when our vacation rental became a nightmare. I need to tell you about the most terrifying night of my life. A night when furniture moved on its own, lights flickered like something out of a horror movie, and my son and I spent hours clinging to our mattresses while they shook beneath us. This happened in Bulgaria in 2020, and even now, years later, I can't think about it without my hands starting to shake. Let me start from the beginning so you understand how we ended up in that apartment in the first place. My son and I were traveling through Eastern Europe that summer. He was 14 at the time, old enough to appreciate the history and culture we were experiencing, but young enough to still get excited about adventure. We'd spent 2 weeks exploring Istanbul, Turkey, wandering through the Grand Bazaar, visiting the Hagia Sophia, eating incredible street food, and soaking up the energy of that amazing city. Our next stop was Varna, Bulgaria. Varna is a beautiful coastal city on the Black Sea, known for its beaches, Roman baths, and vibrant summer atmosphere. We'd planned to spend 4 or 5 days there, relaxing by the water and exploring the old town before moving on to our next destination. We'd booked our bus tickets from Istanbul to Varna, weeks in advance. It was supposed to be about a 10-hour journey, leaving Istanbul in the late morning and arriving in Varna in the evening. That was the plan anyway. But nothing went according to plan that day. First, the bus was delayed, leaving Istanbul by almost 3 hours. Some kind of mechanical problem that took forever to fix. We sat in the hot bus station, sweating and getting increasingly frustrated, watching our departure time come and go. When we finally got on the road, we hit terrible traffic leaving the city. What should have been a 10-hour trip turned into almost 14 hours. We sat on that bus, cramped and uncomfortable, as the sun set and darkness fell and we kept driving and driving. We'd originally planned to arrive in Varna around 8 in the evening and check into our hotel with plenty of time to grab dinner and settle in. Instead, we didn't pull into the Varna bus station until almost midnight. We were exhausted, hungry, and desperately in need of showers. We grabbed our backpacks and headed to the taxi stand, ready to give the driver the address of our hotel. That's when I checked my phone and saw the messages. 3 emails from the hotel, each one more urgent than the last. There had been a plumbing emergency, sewage backup in multiple rooms. The hotel was completely closed for emergency repairs. Our reservation had been canceled. They were very sorry for the inconvenience and would issue a full refund. I stood there in the bus station parking lot at midnight in a foreign city, staring at my phone in disbelief. "Mom, what's wrong?" my son asked, seeing my expression. "Our hotel canceled on us. There was some kind of plumbing disaster. We don't have a place to stay." His eyes went wide. What are we going to do? That's a very good question, I thought. What were we going to do? I pulled out my phone and started frantically searching for available accommodations in Varna. It was peak summer tourist season, and most places were fully booked. The few hotels that had availability were way out of our budget, charging premium prices for last-minute bookings. I expanded my search to include vacation rentals, Airbnbs, anything with a bed and a roof. Most places required at least a few hours' notice for booking. Some required booking a day or more in advance. After 20 minutes of increasingly desperate searching, I found one option, a small apartment in the center of Varna, available for immediate booking, at a price I could afford. The listing didn't have many photos, just a few images of a bedroom and a small kitchen. There were only 2 reviews, both fairly recent, and both basically said it was fine and adequate. Not exactly glowing recommendations, but at midnight with limited options, I wasn't in a position to be picky. I booked it for 3 nights and showed the taxi driver the address on my phone. He nodded and loaded our backpacks into the trunk. The drive through Varna at night was actually quite beautiful. We passed through the city center with its illuminated buildings and lively nightlife, then into quieter residential neighborhoods with tree-lined streets and old houses with gardens. The taxi pulled up in front of a small 3-story house set back from the road. It looked like it had been built sometime in the early 1900s, with ornate details around the windows and a wraparound porch on the ground floor. The ground floor lights were on, and I could see a pretty garden in the front yard with what looked like a gazebo or covered seating area. "This is it," the driver said. I paid him and we got out with our bags. According to the booking instructions, we needed to go to the side door and use the lockbox to get our key. The apartment was on the 3rd floor. We found the lockbox, retrieved the key, and let ourselves into a side entrance that led to a narrow staircase. The stairs were old and wooden, creaking loudly with each step. The stairwell was dimly lit by a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. We climbed to the 3rd floor, which was really more like an attic that had been converted into living space. The ceiling sloped dramatically on both sides, following the roofline of the house. I unlocked the apartment door and we stepped inside. The apartment was small, tiny really. There was a bedroom with 2 single beds, a bathroom, and a small kitchenette area with a hot plate and mini fridge. The ceilings were low and sloped, especially in the bathroom where I had to duck my head to avoid hitting it on the ceiling. "It's cozy," my son said diplomatically, which was teenager code for "this place is kind of depressing." He was right, there was something about the apartment that felt off immediately. Not anything I could point to specifically. It was clean enough. The beds looked freshly made. Nothing was broken or damaged. But the atmosphere felt heavy somehow, oppressive. The air felt thick and stale, like the windows hadn't been open in a long time. And despite it being a warm summer night, the apartment felt cold. I walked over to the window and tried to open it to get some fresh air flowing. The window was stuck, painted shut probably. I tugged on it a few times but couldn't get it to budge. "Let's just get some sleep," I said, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling settling in my stomach. "We're both exhausted. Everything will look better in the morning." We took turns using the tiny bathroom to brush our teeth and change into pajamas. The bathroom was the worst part of the apartment. The ceiling was so low that I couldn't stand up straight. The shower was barely big enough for one person, and there was this pervasive feeling of anxiety whenever I was in there, like something bad had happened in that small, cramped space. But I was too tired to care, too tired to even think about looking for a different place to stay at this hour. We climbed into our respective beds. The mattresses were old and lumpy, the kind that had been used for years and had permanent dents where previous guests had slept. The sheets smelled faintly of mothballs and cheap laundry detergent. "Good night, Mom," my son said from his bed. "Good night, sweetie. Sleep well." I turned off the lamp between our beds and the room fell into darkness. Not complete darkness because some light from the street filtered through the thin curtains, but dark enough that I couldn't see much detail in the room. I closed my eyes and tried to relax. My body was exhausted from the long bus ride, but my mind was still racing. Something about this apartment made me feel on edge, like my nervous system couldn't quite settle down. I must have eventually drifted off, though, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the window, and my son was already awake, looking at his phone. That first day in Varna was actually lovely. We explored the city center, walked along the beach, visited the Roman baths, and had a delicious lunch at a small restaurant near the cathedral. The city was beautiful, the weather was perfect, and we were both in good moods. When we returned to the apartment that evening, it felt less oppressive in the daylight. We made simple dinners on the hot plate, showered in the cramped bathroom, and went to bed early, tired from walking all day. The second night was uneventful too. We slept through the night without any problems. I started to think my initial uneasiness about the apartment had been just exhaustion and stress from the travel delays. The place was fine, a little small and outdated, but fine. If only we'd left after that second night. If only we'd checked out a day early and found somewhere else to stay. But we didn't, and that's how we ended up experiencing the third night. The third day in Varna followed the same pattern as the previous two. We spent the day exploring, this time visiting the sea garden and the aquarium. We had dinner at a beachside restaurant and watched the sunset over the Black Sea. We got back to the apartment around 9 in the evening. We were both tired but happy, looking forward to a good night's sleep before our bus to Sofia the next day. We followed our usual routine: simple dinner from the hot plate, showers, brushing teeth, changing into pajamas. By 10:30 we were both in bed. I turned off the lamp and settled into the uncomfortable mattress, ready for sleep. "Good night, Mom. Good night, honey. Sweet dreams." I closed my eyes. That's when it started. The chandelier hanging from the ceiling in the center of the room suddenly turned on. Not a gradual brightening, but an instant switch from darkness to bright light that made both of us gasp and sit up in bed. "What the—" my son started to say. The light went off, complete darkness again. Then on, off, on, off, on, off. The chandelier was flickering rapidly, like someone was flipping the switch up and down as fast as they could. "Is there a problem with the electricity?" my son asked, his voice tight with concern. "I don't know," I said, getting out of bed and walking toward the light switch on the wall. I flipped the switch to the off position. The chandelier should have turned off completely and stayed off. Instead, it kept flickering. On, off, completely independent of the switch position. A chill ran down my spine. "That's not normal," I said quietly. "No kidding," my son replied, his voice cracking slightly. Then I heard it, a scratching sound coming from the wall next to my son's bed. Not a gentle scratching, like a mouse or a branch against the window. This was loud, aggressive scratching, like someone was dragging their fingernails down the inside of the wall. Scratch, scratch, scratch. My son scrambled out of his bed and came to stand next to me, both of us staring at the wall where the sound was coming from. The scratching got louder, more insistent, moving up and down the wall, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. "Mom, I don't like this," my son whispered. "It's okay," I lied, putting my arm around his shoulders. "There's probably a rat or something in the walls." But I didn't believe that. Rats don't make scratching sounds that organized, that deliberate. The chandelier was still flickering. The scratching continued. Then the walls started creaking, deep groaning creaks, like the wood was under enormous pressure, like something was pushing against it from the other side. The curtain hanging over the window suddenly began to swing, back and forth, in wide arcs that made no sense, because there was no breeze in the room. The window was still stuck shut, and the door to the apartment was closed. But the curtain kept swinging, faster and faster, until it was whipping back and forth so violently I thought it might tear. "We need to leave," my son said, backing toward the door. "Right now." Before I could respond, the curtain rod tore away from the wall with a horrible metallic screech. The heavy rod, which had been mounted with metal brackets screwed into the wall, came down with a tremendous crash, hitting the floor so hard that I felt the vibration through my feet. I screamed. I couldn't help it. The sound that came out of me was pure fear. My son grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the door, but before we could reach it, my mattress moved. I'm not talking about a small shift or settling. The mattress, which had been lying flat on the bed frame, suddenly rolled over on its own. It flipped completely, one side lifting into the air and then flopping down onto the floor with a heavy thud. We both stood frozen, staring at my mattress lying on the floor. "Did you see that?" I whispered. "Yeah," my son breathed. "I saw it." My hands were shaking as I walked over to the mattress. I grabbed one corner and tried to lift it. It was heavy, probably 40 or 50 pounds. There was no way it had just fallen off the bed. The bed frame had rails that should have kept it in place, and even if it had somehow slid off, it wouldn't have flipped completely over like that. But here it was, lying on the floor, completely flipped. I dragged it back onto the bed frame, struggling with the weight of it. My son helped me, and together we managed to get it back in place. "There," I said, breathing hard. "It's fine. Everything's fine." I didn't believe that at all. Nothing about this was fine. I quickly pulled the sheet over the mattress and lay down on it, trying to act calm for my son's sake. He climbed back into his bed, but I could see he was terrified. The chandelier had finally stopped flickering and was now off completely. The scratching had stopped. The room was quiet except for our heavy breathing. "Try to sleep," I told him. "Whatever that was, I think it's over now. I was wrong. So wrong." We'd barely settled back into our beds when I felt it. The mattress beneath me started to shake. Not a gentle vibration. Violent shaking, like someone had grabbed the edges and was rattling it as hard as they could. I grabbed onto the sides of the mattress with both hands, trying to hold on. The shaking got worse, so intense that I was being bounced up and down. "Mom!" my son shouted. I looked over and saw that his mattress was doing the same thing. He was clutching the edges, his knuckles white, trying not to be thrown off. The beds were shaking so hard that they were moving across the floor, creaking and groaning, the frames scraping against the wood. This went on for what felt like forever, but was probably only a minute or two. Then it stopped as suddenly as it had started. Silence. We both lay there, breathing hard, not daring to move. Then, from somewhere outside, I heard the town hall clock striking. Deep, resonant chimes counting out the hour. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 o'clock at night. It had been maybe 30 minutes since we'd first gotten into bed. "Mom, what's happening?" my son asked, his voice small and scared. "I don't know, baby. I don't know. We didn't try to sleep after that. We lay in our beds, rigid with fear, waiting for the next thing to happen. And things kept happening. The scratching in the walls would start again, then stop. Footsteps in the small kitchenette area, even though we could see there was no one there. The sound of cabinet doors opening and closing, the faucet in the bathroom turning on and off. Sometimes there would be 30 minutes of quiet, and we'd start to think it was over. Then something new would start. Around 1 in the morning, we heard what sounded like someone walking up the stairs to our floor. Heavy footsteps getting closer and closer. They stopped right outside our door. We both stared at the door, terrified that it would open. It didn't. But we could feel something on the other side of it, a presence, something standing there, waiting. After about 5 minutes, the footsteps retreated back down the stairs. At 2 o'clock, the town hall clock chimed again. Those deep, ominous sounds echoing through the night made everything feel even more sinister, more like we were trapped in a horror movie. My son started crying quietly. He was trying to be brave, but he was just a kid, and this was beyond anything either of us could understand or explain. "It's going to be okay," I whispered, though I had no idea if that was true. "We just have to make it until morning. As soon as the sun comes up, we're leaving. We'll pack our stuff and get out of here." "Why can't we leave now?" he asked. I'd thought about it. But the idea of going down those dark stairs, past whatever presence we'd felt outside our door, in the middle of the night in a foreign city where we didn't speak the language and didn't know where else to go, seemed almost worse than staying put. "We'll be safer here until daylight," I said, "just a few more hours." The mattresses shook twice more that night. Each time we held on for dear life, riding out the violent vibrations until they stopped. Objects in the room started moving. I watched my son's backpack slide across the floor on its own, pushed by invisible hands. The lamp between our beds fell over with a crash, though no one was near it. The temperature in the room kept fluctuating. 1 minute it would be freezing cold, cold enough that we could see our breath. The next minute, it would be oppressively hot and stuffy. The worst moment came around 4 in the morning. The town hall clock had just finished chiming 4 times when both of our mattresses started shaking again. But this time, they lifted completely off the bed frames. I'm not exaggerating or embellishing this. Our mattresses lifted into the air, about a foot off the frames, with us still on them. For about 10 seconds we were suspended in the air, lying on floating mattresses. Then they dropped, hard, slamming back onto the frames with enough force that the bed frames cracked. My son screamed, a full, terrified scream that probably woke the neighbors. I scrambled off my mattress and ran to his bed, climbing in next to him and wrapping my arms around him. We're okay, I kept saying, rocking him like I used to when he was little. We're going to be fine, nothing's going to hurt us. But I didn't know that. I didn't know what was happening, or what it wanted, or if it would hurt us. We stayed huddled together in his bed for the rest of the night, both of us too scared to close our eyes. The activity continued in waves, periods of terrifying phenomena followed by brief stretches of quiet. Each time the town hall clock chimed, marking another hour passing, I felt both relief that we were closer to morning and dread about what might happen in the next hour. 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. Finally, around 8 in the morning, sunlight started filtering through the window. Real, genuine daylight. The apartment fell completely silent. Whatever had been tormenting us all night seemed to retreat with the darkness, but we were both too traumatized to feel relief. We were exhausted, emotionally drained, physically sore from clutching the mattresses all night. We need to pack and get out of here, I said, right now. But we couldn't move. We were so tired, so overwhelmed. We just lay there in the bed, holding onto each other. Hours passed. 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. We could hear normal daytime sounds filtering up from outside. People talking, cars driving by, birds singing. Normal life happening while we were trapped in this nightmare apartment. It wasn't until almost noon that we finally found the strength to get up and pack our belongings. We moved quickly, throwing our clothes and toiletries into our backpacks without bothering to fold or organize anything. We just wanted out. I didn't even bother trying to contact the owner or leave a review. I just wanted to escape from that place and never think about it again. We grabbed our bags and practically ran down the stairs, our footsteps echoing in the stairwell. We burst out the side door into the bright sunshine and fresh air. The pretty garden with the gazebo looked cheerful and normal in the daylight. The house looked like any other old building, charming and quaint. You'd never know that something terrifying lived on the 3rd floor. We found a small hotel near the beach and checked in, paying extra for an immediate check-in. The room was bright and modern and felt completely normal. Safe. We both took long showers trying to wash off the fear and exhaustion from the night before. Then we collapsed into the clean, normal beds and slept for hours. When we woke up, it was evening. We'd slept through most of the day. "Are you okay?" I asked my son. "I don't know," he said honestly. "That was the scariest thing that's ever happened to me." "Me too, baby. Me too." We talked about what had happened, trying to make sense of it. Had we both hallucinated somehow, some kind of shared delusion brought on by exhaustion? But we'd both seen and experienced the same things. The flickering lights, the scratching in the walls, the mattresses moving and shaking, the curtain rod falling, objects moving on their own. You can't have a shared hallucination that's detailed and consistent. What we experienced was real. We spent 2 more days in Varna, trying to salvage our vacation and create some better memories in the city. We never went back to that apartment or even down that street. When we left Varna on the bus to Sofia, I felt an enormous sense of relief, like we were finally safe, finally free from whatever had been in that apartment. But the experience has stayed with me, with both of us. It's been several years now, and I still think about that night regularly. My son does too. We've talked about it many times, going over the details, trying to understand what happened and why. We've researched the building online, trying to find information about its history. Who built it? Who lived there? Has anyone died there? We haven't found much. The building seems to have a fairly mundane history. No recorded murders or tragedies. Nothing that would explain what we experienced. I've read countless stories about hauntings and paranormal experiences, looking for similarities to what we went through. Some stories match certain elements, objects moving on their own, lights flickering, strange sounds. But I've never found a story that quite captures the intensity and relentlessness of what happened to us that night. My son, who's now a young adult, says that night changed him, made him more aware that there are things in the world we can't explain or understand, things that exist outside the boundaries of what we consider normal and possible. I feel the same way. Before that night, I was a skeptic about paranormal activity. I thought ghost stories were just stories, imagination and exaggeration. I don't think that anymore. Something was in that apartment, something angry or malevolent or just chaotic. Something that wanted to terrify us, to make us feel powerless and afraid. And it succeeded. I still have nightmares sometimes. I'll dream that I'm back in that apartment, lying in that bed, feeling the mattress start to shake beneath me. I'll wake up with my heart pounding, clutching my own mattress, and it takes me a minute to remember where I am and that I'm safe. My son has nightmares too. He's told me about dreams where he's back in that room, hearing the scratching in the walls, watching the curtains swing back and forth. We've both become very careful about where we stay when we travel now. We research places thoroughly. We read reviews carefully, looking for any hints of paranormal activity or guests having strange experiences. We avoid old buildings when possible, especially ones that have been divided into apartments. Maybe we're being paranoid. Maybe what happened to us was a one-time thing, a unique situation we'll never encounter again. But I'm not taking any chances. That night in Varna taught me that there are things in this world that we don't understand, forces or entities or energies that can interact with our physical reality in ways that seem impossible. And once you've experienced something like that, once you've felt genuine supernatural terror, you can never quite go back to seeing the world the way you did before. I'll never forget that night. The sound of the town hall clock chiming through the darkness, marking each endless hour, the feeling of the mattress shaking beneath me, the scratching in the walls, the chandelier flickering, the sense of some presence in the apartment with us, something that delighted in our fear. It's been several years, but it's impossible to forget. Some experiences mark you, change you, stay with you forever. That night in Varna was one of those experiences, and I hope, with everything in me, that I never experience anything like it again.